the Christian Union gets involved in what is called peer-to-peer counseling, in the sense that the age of the executive committee of the CU is the same age with CU members, and yet the conflicts within the Christian Union have still got to be resolved, except when they get out of hand and you may have to involve the patron or teachers or others. And so the subject of conflict of interest is something that needs to be included in the training of the CU leaders, because that's a role they will play, and it's good when they have been helped to see what it is and why it is important, and the wise way of dealing with the issues that come. The first thing that we must agree right at the beginning is to agree that the Christian Union must be taught that there is nothing wrong with conflict. That as long as we have different personalities, we will see things differently. There will be people in the executive who are quiet, others are noisy. There will be people with different personalities. That will create some differences. But those are not conflicts that should be taken out of hand. It is that they are normal. And it's not normal for people who are breathing human, properly human, not to have some differences. And I think that that needs to be something that is taught. The first principle taught is that they should not assume that because you're a Christian Union, there will be no disagreement ever. If they did that, they would be very different from the New Testament church. The New Testament church disagreed, for example, on how to help the widows. The Grecian Jews were feeling like these are Jews that did not come from Palestine, were feeling like their widows were not being looked after well. These are differences, and they were corrected. They appointed people to look after it and do it in a proper way. That's the way the conflict in the New Testament church was resolved. So that the first thing that we must mention, like we normally will mention in meetings when dealing with this issue of conflict of interest. You can differ because of your personalities. You can also differ because of your background, where you are brought up. Things are seen differently. There are people who like talking using certain languages. To another person who grew up in a different family, that kind of language is rude. Yet the other person was not even conscious there was any rudeness. So the background can be a cause of a problem. It can also be a problem of gender. In a Christian where there are boys and girls, there are certain ways of certain behavior that's likely true of boys and not true of girls. So there will be a difference that is not caused by any ill intention, but just because of your gender difference. So it can be personality, can be background, can be gender difference. Could also be because of denominational background. Some are Pentecostals, some are evangelicals, some are, from historical churches. And the way they are brought up and the way things are done is different. There are people who read their prayers. Others feel, what? How can you read a prayer? You don't even say a prayer. You pray. Now, but you see, because you have never seen anybody read a prayer, you'll be very offended of whatever. So, and all that. So it needs to be understood that it's not abnormal for a disagreement. So the critical thing is not to have a disagreement, because if you have no disagreements, there are three possibilities. Either the chairman have become a dictator, and the last time somebody disagreed, they were so roughly treated, or the others go quiet. So their meetings are always cohesive. That's not a negative cohesiveness, because if there is no disagreement, it shows that people are not thinking. And because they are not thinking, the output of that meeting, the output of that fellowship will be a lower level quality than if everybody's mind was actually engaged. And I think that's why it is bad not to have any disagreement, any difference in views. Number two, when you have difference in views, even when I'm the one who has come with a good suggestion, if somebody tells me how to improve it, sure, I should be grateful. It's not agreeing with mine. He did not fully accept mine, but mine has triggered his mind to think of even something better. And when a better idea comes, the old idea that was not as good should give way. So, lack of differences may be a sign that not only people are not thinking, not only that people are fearing the leader, but it could also mean that people are not evaluating the ideas that are coming in. So in one sentence, it's not a good idea if there are no differences at all. So, and that's why this subject is very important, that the Christian Union leadership, the Christian Union members need to understand that. Of course, there are bad conflicts. Conflicts that are violent, conflicts that are insolent, those are bad conflicts. But they are good conflicts when we are trying to bring ourselves to an agreement on how to do things better. That's a good difference. You know, when you talk about conflicts, you are talking about serious disagreements. In other words, this is not just a small disagreement, it's serious disagreement. Then you can say those people have a conflict. A difference that goes to a serious level has developed into a conflict. But of course, conflict also refers to struggle. There's something we are struggling. We are almost fighting. We are trying our best. I don't want your idea to be the one that wins. I want mine to win. Struggle, that's a conflict. Sometimes even arguments become argumentative, where people are raising their voices. But difference in opinions depends on how you are managing it. And so when you talk about people in a conflict, there may be differing opinion, or they may be opposed to each other. And that is what we mean when you're talking about conflict. So the critical subject is how to resolve any conflict between members of the fellowship or between committee members. How do you deal with it? Since there are several types of differences, like I have said, let's look at, for example, natural differences. When the problem has come because you have been doing something for a long time, people are not thinking straight, they can't even remember what you said earlier, so you end up with differences. That can be sorted out by calling off, creating a break. If the problem has come from differences in background, then it means instead of when two people are disagreeing, the leader should give opportunity to each to give the background to the answer. Why did you think about that? Where did that idea come from? Ask questions that help each person to explain their background. And you might again start seeing that it was a good idea after all. It's only you do not understand the background. It can also be a difference that has come from what is acceptable habit and what is not acceptable habit. I think you need to ask yourself, is the other person's habit really harming you? If it's not harming you, we need to agree on such things when it's habits that, for example, maybe somebody clicks when they are talking. Instead of allowing it to develop into a conflict, and already if it's a conflict, help people to see the importance of respecting others and knowing that we are born different. And sometimes it's simply that you don't like the look of another person. You think they're ugly. You think they are too big, too grotesque, whatever. And that creates a conflict when you don't have respect for another person because of the way they look. That's a sign that you have a problem, because if the way I look is not good to you, you shouldn't have a problem with me. I didn't create myself. You have a problem with the God who created me like that. We must learn to accept each other, to accept the way God has brought us up. These kind of natural differences are very important. So when it's a difference that is natural, that's the easiest to sort out. Simply accept it. You cannot ask me to change what I am naturally. Accept me the way God created me. And not accepting it is a sign of maturity on your part. When you can't accept that the way God created me is okay, it will not be a very good idea. Sometimes when it's personality differences, they can be very funny. Some people are neat, others are not neat. You are sitting next to each other, my papers are all over me. Yours are kept nicely in a neat position. And the one with a neat position gets offended because of the other one. Again, it's a sign of lack of maturity, because in as long as my confused papers are not confusing me, they look bad to you. What we came is not a competition on who can organize papers better than the other. It's on ideas. This meeting is about ideas. And if I can go through my heap and still find the point I wanted to say, what's that problem? If that will confuse you, it's not confusing me. So, neatness should not, or being organized, should not be something that's causing people to have conflict. But I'll tell you what can have real serious conflict. It's high expectations of others. And one of the weaknesses of human nature is that we have very low expectation of ourselves and very high expectations of others. If I come late, I have a good excuse. I was late in class. If somebody else comes late, there must be something wrong with them. So you have conflict simply because you have low expectation of yourself and high expectations of others. Or sometimes you explain your failure easily. You don't accept the failure of others. In order to deal with that conflict, please have high expectations of yourself and lower expectations of others. That means when they do well, it excites you how well they have done. If they don't do as well, you will be more forgiving and more accepting. So high expectations, so you need to ask yourself, what expectations are you having of others? And lower your expectations. Be willing to accept the standards. Then find a way of motivating everybody to do their best. And if their best is not good enough, you still work together. Because there is something they are adding to the relationship. There's something they are adding to the fellowship. And that will be something that will be important. But some of the conflicts simply come from bad communication. We do not communicate. The way you are speaking a language. You should never speak the way you want to speak. You should speak the way the other person can understand you. So if all they can understand is simple English, don't force them to go to a dictionary to find what you mean. It will be important that there is effective communication. So you may be disagreeing and in conflict because somebody didn't understand what you said. So in order to reduce conflict, why not try to be slower, clearer in your discussion, or in your talk, or in your communication, so that the other person can easily understand you? Why don't you want to understand the language of the other person so that you speak in their language at the level they can understand? Then there will be less conflict. But the other thing that can cause problem is not understanding the decision-making process that one party is following as opposed to another one. So you get annoyed that people are not making a decision quickly. Not understanding it is because that matter must be referred to so and so before I can make a decision. So explaining to each other the decision-making process is something that will help us to better relate with one another. And we need to ask ourselves, what is that decision-making process? Of course, we we are talking about any process. Each group must agree this way which will be making decisions. Each person must have a way of making decisions. And the other party must know that process. Especially if you're going to be there for long, you need to understand, you need to share and agree on that process. You need to understand as some of the differences will be spiritual differences. Like I said, because of we are a Christian union, not a church. It then means that we come from different denominations and we have some of the theologies will be different because of our differing background. So, doctrinal understanding of various things that the Christian union has to deal with must be quite an issue. And we need to agree, understand. First of all, understand your theology, share what it is you believe. I share mine. And then we have to agree as a group what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what can be ignored, so that people on that particular matter, let us agree to disagree. In other words, there is a difference on that matter. And yet it is not causing any conflict because we have accepted each other, given our various denominational background. So the doctrinal understanding will be then something that instead of causing differences will help. Because as you explain your doctrinal understanding, you might help me even to abandon mine and come to yours. But if the two of us think mine is right and yours is right, then you accept both. And as long as it's not affecting the application of day-to-day objectives of the Christian Union, we just allow and work together on such matters. After all, such matters are not cardinal. They are less than cardinal. That's why we can differ and still be in fellowship, and both of us are still going to heaven together. One of the things you have to, so that to reduce your conflict, is to understand that the heart is deceitful. Isn't that the message of Jeremiah 17 verse 9? Exceedingly deceitful. Because the heart is deceitful, three things will follow. You might think the other person's memory is wrong, yet it's accurate that it is yours that is actually wrong. You might have a misunderstanding of what somebody said, even with the very best, because your heart has already made up its mind on a certain way. If that be true, that you agree your heart is deceitful, then you'll be very careful before making quick judgments, before asking questions and digging down to see what the implications are underneath. And that will reduce conflict. So before you can call a conflict, you have gone through and understood each other's spiritual condition. And I think that will help to reduce the possibility of serious conflict. A deceitful heart is quite a problem. But the thing that really causes a lot of differences is insecurity. When you are not sure of yourself, not sure of your self-worth, rather defensive on every matter. I say something like, my mother really cooked well yesterday. In your understanding, you think I'm criticizing your mother. So you have a conflict. But it's coming from you are living a very insecure life. That's what Christ came to help us. So that you become confident that God loves you. That means whoever else doesn't love you doesn't frighten you. You become confident on God understanding you. So whoever doesn't understand you, you want to help him to understand. But even if he didn't, you will not cry. It will not cause you tears. Because you understand. Now, if you operate from a state of security, then the people kind of be rude to you and it doesn't bother you. People will say something and differ from you, but it doesn't bother you. You have the patience to listen because you are operating from security. So that's something that people need. So do not think it's a sign of maturity when you are always disagreeing or even on petty issues. You need to ask yourself, why am I so insecure? Of course, the other thing that could be causing problems is jealousy, where you want you to be the only one that shines. But if you're a Christian, you understand God can use anybody. If he could use a donkey, surely, who can't he use? When you understand that, then jealousy will disappear, because you know it's God who decides to give what gift. And so the thing to avoid, because it causes you to be jealous of others, is egocentricity. You know, being centered on self. Matthew 7:3 is dealing with this. But please check whether you are egocentric yourself, because if you are, it will cause a lot of difference. What is egocentric? It will be a person where everything revolves around you. Everybody is taller or shorter, like you call somebody short. You are 6'2", I am 6, and then you call me short. Surely we are both tall. It's only you are taller than me. But when you become the measure, the standard, everybody else is measured against, then you even call tall people short. So you need to deal with that matter. But the thing that could cause you real serious trouble is becoming somebody inflexible. So you end up with a lot of quarreling that have to do with lack of, can I call it lack of being flexible or being inflexible? That will give. Flexibility allows you to accommodate people. And that way you have less differences and less conflict in the process. And I think that's something we need to be aware about. Let's now look at a passage that deals with conflict in the book of Galatians, chapter 2, verse 4. Then after 14 years, Galatians chapter 2, verse 1 to 14. Then after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem, this time with Barnabas. I took Titus along also. I went in response to a revelation and meeting privately with those esteemed as leaders. I presented to them the gospel that I preach among the Gentiles. I wanted to be sure I was not running and had not been running my race in vain. Yet not even Titus, who was with me, was compelled to be circumcised, even though he was a Greek. This matter arose because some false believers had infiltrated our ranks to spy on the freedom we have in Christ Jesus and to make us slaves. We did not give in to them for a moment, so that the truth of the gospel might be preserved for you. For you, I think means the Gentiles, the Galatians who are Gentiles. Verse 6. As for those who are held in high esteem, whatever they were makes no difference to me. God does not show favoritism by adding nothing. They added nothing to my message. On the contrary, they recognized that I had been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been to the circumcised. For God, who was at work in Peter as an apostle to the circumcised, was also at work in me as an apostle to the Gentiles. James, Evers, and John, those esteemed as pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, and they recognized the grace given to me. They agreed that we should not you should not go to the Gentiles and they agreed that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. All they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor, the very thing I had been eager to do all along. When Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. The other Jews joined him in the hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas, or Peter, in front of them all, you are a Jew, yet you live in a Gentile, like a Gentile, and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs? Quite something. It's a conflict, and it is resolved. Look at verse 2a. Listen to the Spirit before acting or reacting is what we learn. They took time to think. They took time to pray. Still in verse 2b. Apollo did that privately, not embarrassed. In other words, if there's somebody respected, don't embarrass him before the people. If there's somebody who has done something wrong, do not, first of all, take him to a side and deal with the matter privately. Don't let a small difference become a public difference until that happens. But you are trying to avoid making it a public difference. Verse 3, be open to state your position up front. Say exactly what you mean. Don't go around in circles. And that's what verse 3 teaches. Verse 4, we are reminded that tares and wheat always grow together. Beware of the possibility of false brethren that are coming. So once you understand that there could be people with the false message, then you are clear. You know what to do. And verse 5, not peace at any cost, if cardinal issue. The same Paul who goes to privately, not to cause embarrassment, when it now become a public issue, he does not want to give in because the people have come, they are the leaders, they have come from the headquarters. No, he stands the ground. So in trying to sort out conflict, we are not suggesting peace at any cost. In verse 7 and 8, your fruitful life is the best inference. The fact that Paul's life had such a mark made his whatever he was saying credible. Then verse 9 and verse 10, deal with your personal internal fears so that they don't become public and bothering everybody. And I think that's something that's important for us to have at the back of our mind. When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas in front of them all, you are a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile, and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow? He made an argument that Peter could not do, because this is the way you have been acting, this is the way you believe. How come now you want to agree with people that want to force Gentiles to do things, cultural things that are only true to Jews, and they are not part of Christianity? They may be in Judaism, but they are not part of Christianity. That sometimes may be the thing you need to do. Open up, talk things openly, and then people understand what they are disagreeing about and why they are disagreeing, and that will be quite a help. So there may come to a time like verse 11 saying, when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. There may be time for that, but there's also time for going privately to a person in order to ensure there is peace. So don't create conflict if you can avoid it. It will be important that you understand that if you can avoid conflict, the ministry is likely to go further. But where you cannot avoid conflict, deal with it, and the ministry will go even further with the clarity. Don't try to go with people taking them for a ride that you are in agreement when the truth is you are not in agreement. So what have we said? Conflict is normal. All you need is to learn how to resolve it. And most important, to learn the truth that we must forgive one another. Because the reason why we are able to operate together in a fellowship is because we forgive each other.